Book 2, June 2020, is We Were 8 Years in Power, and I'm particularly reading from The Case for Reparations. I thought maybe I'd be able to read some more of the book, but it seems like that essay is going to take up our whole time. Um, let's keep going. The oft-celebrated GI Bill similarly failed Black Americans by mirroring the broader country's insistence on a racist housing policy. Though ostensibly colorblind, Title III of the bill, which aimed to give veterans access to low-interest home loans, left Black veterans to tangle with white officials at their local Veterans Administration, as well as with the same banks that had for years refused to grant mortgages to Blacks. The historian Kathleen J. Friedel observes in her 2009 book, The GI Bill, that so many Blacks were disqualified from receiving Title III benefits that it is more accurate simply to say that Blacks could not use this particular title. In Cold War America, home ownership was seen as a means of instilling patriotism and as a civilizing and anti-radical force. No man who owns his own house and the lot can be a communist, claimed William Levitt, who pioneered the modern suburb with the development of various Levitt towns, his famous planned communities. He has too much to do. But the Levitt towns were, with Levitt's willing acquiescence, segregated throughout their early years. Daisy and Bill Myers, the first Black family to move into Levittown, Pennsylvania, were greeted with protests and a burning cross. A neighbor who opposed the family said that Bill Myers was probably a nice guy, but every time I look at him, I see $2,000 drop off the value of my house. The neighborhood had good reason to be afraid. Bill and Daisy Myers were from the other side of John C. Calhoun's dual society. If they moved next door, housing policy almost guaranteed that their neighbors' property values would decline. Whereas shortly before the New Deal, a typical mortgage required a large down payment and full repayment within about 10 years, the creation of the Homeowners Loan Corporation in 1933, and then the Federal Housing Administrations the following year, allowed banks to offer loans requiring no more than 10% down, amortized over 20 to 30 years. Without federal intervention in the housing market, massive suburbanization would have been impossible, writes Thomas J. Segru, a historian at the University of Pennsylvania. In 1930, only 30% of Americans owned their own home. By 1960, more than 60% were homeowners. Home ownership became an emblem of American citizenship. The emblem was not to be awarded to Blacks. The American real estate industry believed segregation to be a moral principle. As late as 1950, the National Association of Real Estate Boards Code of Ethics warned that a realtor should never be instrumental in introducing it into a neighborhood any race or nationality or any individuals whose presence would clearly be detrimental to property values. A 1943 brochure specified that such potential undesirables might include madams, bootleggers, gangsters, and a colored man of means who was given his children a college education and thought they were entitled to live among whites. The federal government concurred. It was the Homeowners Loan Corporation, not a private trade association, that pioneered the practice of redlining, selectively granting loans and insisting that any property it insured be covered by a restrictive covenant, a clause in the deed forbidding the sale of the property to anyone other than whites. Millions of dollars flowed from tax coffers into segregated white neighborhoods. For perhaps the first time, the federal government embraced the discriminatory attitudes of the marketplace. The historian Kenneth T. Jackson wrote in his 1985 book, Crabgrass Frontier, a history of suburbanization. Previously, prejudices were personalized and individualized. FAJ exhorted segregation and enshrined it as public policy. whole areas of cities were declared ineligible for loan guarantees. Redlining was not officially outlawed until 1968 by the Fair Housing Act. By then, the damage was done, and reports of redlining by banks have continued. I know that redlining still goes on. Um, my wife we were redlined into the community we're in. It's 3 years ago. The federal government is premised on equal fealty from all its citizens, who in return are to receive equal treatment. But as late as the mid-20th century, this bargain was not granted to black people, who reportedly paid a higher price for citizenship and received less in return. Plunder had been the essential feature of slavery, of the society described by Calhoun, but practically a full century after the end of the Civil War, and the abolition of slavery, the plunder, quiet, systemic, submerged, continued even amidst the aims and achievements of New Deal liberals. So that's we were 8 years in power, and as you can see, housing policy it was against us too. It's rough because every institution has blocks for us, and so when you're young and you start to realize all of these blocks, it can be devastating and crushing. And I think one of the largest forms of death for young black people is suicide. And I hope that we can create institutions to give these people, our young people, space so that they feel like they can live. Thank you for supporting me. Take care of your mind, take care of your body, and be safe.